Howdy y'all, welcome back to the channel. Today will be a very special video, something I've put together that's been burning a hole in my mind's eye for the last week or so since I first read about this. This is going to be an 11,000 subscriber special. And again, thank you so much for being here and sharing this platform with me. And with these celebratory videos, I try to stay away from the current narrative and the old world series and dive into more weird or esoteric subject matter. So today will be a video doing just that. We're going to focus on something that I think many of my fans with a wide variety of views about the old world will enjoy. In this unique narrative I'm about to present, we have so many different ties that are made to other aspects of this old world history research, including free energy, Native American buildings, ley lines, secret military bases, domes, and even the good book of the Bible. So with that being said, let us jump right into today's video. Before man's western expansion, manifest destiny if you want to call it that, into the furthest reaches of the California desert, current narrative history tells us that many ancient Native American cultures occupied and flourished in these desert areas. The land barren, the hardships these native groups must have endured could be considered endless. And to understand how they survived, we must first try to look at the land the way that the Native Americans looked at the land. Through ancient wisdom, it appears the natives were able to traverse the rough terrain and establish a lifestyle that could be supported off the most minimal of requirements. One of the things that made this survival and this travel possible were the numerous natural monuments spread throughout this open desert. These points of reference became ingrained in the minds of the Native Americans, allowing them to meet, trade, and travel with relative ease. In the deserts of ancient California, where the Mojave and Serrano are said to have thrived, we find one of the most unique and seldom talked about naturally occurring monuments in all of the world. This spherical piece of history was renowned to the natives as a gift from the gods, a place of healing and worship, and the location of the yearly meeting of the tribes for many centuries. Here, at this massive, almost inconceivable object, Mojave chiefs held seances and also brought their sick to be healed. This sacred boulder, unlike anything else found in North America and possibly the world, would go on to affect the history of this area enormously. The boulder is known today as Giant Rock. It was founded in Landers, California, part of the Mojave Desert, sometime well before the 17th century, as ancient native Mojave myth speaks repeatedly of the Giant Rock boulder. Now, Giant Rock is said to be the largest freestanding boulder in all of North America and appears to be the largest freestanding boulder in all of the world. At this time, the Giant Rock covers 5,800 square feet, stands well over 7 stories tall, and weighs approximately 30,000 tons. The boulder, or Giant Rock, also has a relatively uniform spherical shape. Now, this Giant Rock already appears to be something out of a fairy tale, a myth, or a legend, but the story, when we look at the true history of Giant Rock and the surrounding area, becomes even stranger. According to historian and esoteric history buff George W. Van Tassel, the Giant Rock was under the, quote, sign of the Scorpion. Now, he has it written in his narrative that the chief of the tribe of the Mojave at the yearly gathering at Giant Rock would apply a hieroglyph, and this hieroglyph was the sign of the Scorpion, which denoted Giant Rock as a place of healing and a place that was sacred. No other hieroglyph was allowed to ever be placed on Giant Rock besides the sign of the Scorpion. Now, we fast forward a bit, and this is in Van Tassel's narrative of Giant Rock, and comes along Frank Critzer in the early 1930s. Frank is a German-born but fully Americanized citizen who has served in the United States military. Frank is a bit of a loner, according to Van Tassel's narrative, and has a small obsession with both airplanes and this idea of free energy. At the time, Van Tassel was living in California and happened upon Frank Critzer when Frank came into Van Tassel's family's auto garage looking for help fixing his car but having little to no money. Frank actually went on to trade Van Tassel his knowledge for help on his vehicle. And at this time, Van Tassel and Frank Critzer are said to have begun what you could call a friendly acquaintance. However, within a few months of their friendship beginning, Critzer revealed to Van Tassel that he had been in contact with the local Native American tribes in the Mojave Desert, and with their knowledge, Critzer had actually begun tunneling under what he knew as the Giant Rock. There, he said that he set up a makeshift home for himself and had been squatting, so to speak, basically living underneath of Giant Rock. Van Tassel was amazed, not only to find out about a giant undocumented boulder in the middle of the Mojave Desert, but also to learn that Critzer had been living underneath of it. Van Tassel thought at most Critzer could have been living under this rock for a few weeks. However, upon further discussion and investigation, he came to find out that Critzer had actually been living under the Giant Rock for years. Long enough that Critzer had actually gained squatter's rights for the boulder and the surrounding land. Van Tassel could not comprehend how Critzer could live in the middle of the barren Mojave Desert, where the days are said to be miserably hot and the nights are achingly cold. This is when Critzer began to inform Van Tassel of the more esoteric information about the Giant Rock, including that beneath the rock was maintained a relatively hospitable atmosphere. And furthermore, at this point, Critzer also revealed he had an intention of dynamiting the Giant Rock from beneath in hopes of hollowing out a small portion for himself to live in. Critzer did exactly what he said he was going to do. Using dynamite, he created a 400 square foot home for himself beneath Giant Rock. While temperatures outside in the Mojave Desert ranged from 25 degrees to 115 degrees Fahrenheit, inside Critzer's rock home was a constant temperature never less than 55 degrees even in the winter and never exceeding 85 degrees even in the summer. Scientific thought at the time believed that the rock somehow absorbed and helped to maintain energy from the sun, and that would help to maintain the temperatures as well. Now, with Critzer's home at Giant Rock becoming a bit of a newspaper headline and a popular attraction, the area began to receive a lot more attention than it ever had. Critzer himself remained relatively reclusive and avoided the public eye while he could. However, he continued his esoteric research into free energy and other seldom discussed aspects of our realm. Critzer soon discovered that his home, the Giant Rock, had some really amazing aspects about it that really set it apart as a scientific achievement and something that should really have been researched more. In the 1940s, Critzer began to turn his findings into a theorized paper on the hidden area and hidden elements found within Giant Rock. However, before his paper could be published, Critzer died. Depending on which source you read, there are many different versions of what happened to him, and they are all very tragic and they are all very questionable. Mainstream sources will tell you that Critzer had stolen from the local hardware store, including possibly sticks of dynamite, in plain sight, and basically waited at his home for police to arrive. Now, other sources will say that Critzer was targeted because of the hidden knowledge he had gained and was looking to expose. Even further down the rabbit hole are sources that say the US government believed that Critzer was actually a German spy and that Giant Rock itself was believed to be a recon center for Germans intercepting US messages. Either way you look at it, on a dreary morning in 1942, police, with soldiers, arrived to Giant Rock to take Critzer in for what they called questioning. Critzer appeared at his door, seemingly unfazed, and agreed to go with the troops. However, before he left, he asked to go back into his giant rock home, either for his coat or his glasses, and at this time, he is said to have barricaded himself inside the giant rock. This is where this part of the narrative gets really tricky. The soldiers are said to have taken his barricading himself in giant rock as an admission of guilt. They are said to have thrown a flashbang grenade into giant rock, which somehow ignited the dynamite inside the home and blew everything up. Critzer was said to have been killed instantly. Now, according to Van Tassel, who at this point had become really good friends with Critzer, at the time of Critzer's funeral, Critzer's family home was actually raided, and that contained the only remains of his unfinished work. So at this point, all of Critzer's life work, including his home at Giant Rock, had been either destroyed or purposefully lost. The giant rock itself, however, still stood strong, and luckily for us reading about this today, Critzer had shared many of his findings and ideas with Van Tassel. So let us now get into what happened to Van Tassel, and let's talk about the magical cathedral that he built right next to Giant Rock. So, according to Van Tassel, Giant Rock could harness and store energy. Critzer, before his death in his research, had discovered that Giant Rock is actually lying directly on top of a ley line. Critzer had predicted that these ley lines across the earth, which many ancient artifacts and different temples and things of the such were built on top of, these ancient ley lines provided some sort of healing energy, and Critzer predicted that this was done through a undecipherable process, or a process that human beings simply could not understand. Critzer believed that Giant Rock may not have been naturally occurring at all, and rather that Giant Rock could have been created by an ancient, advanced civilization. So at this point in the 1950s, Van Tassel had moved to the area of Giant Rock, and with the information that he had at his disposal, he began collecting his own data. Unlike Critzer, however, Van Tassel did not plan to release any of his information or findings or theories to the public, and this could have been out of fear, but he instead intended to use this information and the area of Giant Rock as his own spiritual getaway. Van Tassel opens a collection of buildings near or on Giant Rock, and he even lands the contract, if you want to call it that, for permission to build his own private airstrip in the Mojave Desert, and he calls it Giant Rock Airport. The most stunning by far of Van Tassel's creations, however, is the Integratron. Now, I'm not going to dive into the functions of this mystical device too deeply, however, I will give you some facts about it. It's a 16-sided building labeled as acoustically perfect, which stands 38 feet tall and has a diameter of 55 feet. It is said to be built directly on top of the ley line, and before it was completed, Van Tassel claimed that the final product would be able to achieve anti-gravity and a form of remote viewing, or what he called time travel. However, before the Integratron was officially completed and opened to the public, just before Van Tassel was to make a public appearance and announcement about the device, in 1978, Van Tassel died suspiciously of a heart attack. Van Tassel's own family, friends, and even his doctor have discussed how focused Van Tassel was on his health, and they all have claimed that Van Tassel was in perfect health the week of his death. He would take daily walks, practice spiritual techniques for balance, including yoga. He ate healthy, and he took care of himself in general. So for him to die of a heart attack is very suspect as well. With his death, Van Tassel's plan for the Integratron was lost. Today, the building still stands, and it functions as a museum of sorts, providing tours and demos of the perfectly balanced harmonics of the Integratron building. So, now that we have those ideas in place, there are two more aspects of the narrative I'd like to discuss. First, we have all of this occurring in the Mojave Desert in an area that's known as Landers, California. Just as the name suggests, Landers was named for the apparent landing and sighting of UFOs. Initially an unincorporated area of California, Landers became known as one of the most frequently written locations of UFO sightings beginning in the 1930s and 40s. The largest UFO experiencers meeting up until that time was held at Giant Rock, Landers, California. This meeting was known as the Giant Rock Spacecraft Convention and met in Landers annually every year for more than 25 years. So what I'm trying to say to you is there is a significant UFO presence said to be felt directly in the area of Giant Rock. Now, the next aspect I want to point out, and for me, this is the real meat and potatoes of this video, is that Giant Rock and Landers, California itself fall into the jurisdiction of the Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center, also known as 29 Palms Military Base. This isn't just a military or Marine Corps base, this is the Marine Corps base. This is the largest Marine Corps base in the entire world, covering nearly 600,000 acres of land and home to the largest military training area in North America, known simply as Mojave Viper. Within this secretive military location, not many, if any, of the truly remarkable discoveries or findings ever get out to the public. It's more likely that we use this military base not only for training, but also for the hiding of the discoveries we have made throughout the Pacific Northwest. It is said a fully completed, functional, furnished Middle Eastern town called Combat Town sits in the middle of 29 Palms Base and is used for complex military training. If there is a full city hidden inside the area that no one has ever seen before, who is to say there are not countless more relics of the past hidden within this massive military area? This is all private land. We're no longer allowed to access it, and the largest marine base in the world is built directly next to Giant Rock on top of ancient ley lines. This leads me to the part of the video where I want to get absolutely off the charts with it, and the last idea I want to present. Now, in recent years, it's written that Giant Rock has broke into two pieces. And first of all, let me just say, in my personal opinion, I believe that giant rock appears a lot smaller in modern photographs than it does in photographs from the 1930s and earlier. To me, it appears that giant rock has gotten smaller somehow. Now, the current narrative won't really discuss that at all, but the current narrative will tell you that the rock has splintered or broke open or broke into two pieces. Now, this is where we get to the really interesting part. When the rock broke open, you know what they found on the inside? Quartz crystal. A whole lot of quartz crystal. Apparently, giant rock is made mainly out of quartz crystal. I'm not sure if you know this already, but from what I read, quartz is said to have infinite healing properties and was very important to all of the earliest Native American tribes. Quartz also has the ability to harness or conduct electricity. So essentially, what we see in giant rock is one large conductor or harnesser of energy. One giant conductor of electricity found on top of an ancient native healing land, which is said to be founded over ley lines in nearly a perfectly spherical shape, being the largest boulder in the entire world, which attracted not only UFOs, but eventually the US government, who turned Giant Rock, the airport, and the surrounding area into 21 Palms military base, the largest Marine base in the United States of America. Talk about coincidence, or maybe, just maybe, there's a little bit of history that's been hidden here. Now, the last thing I thought was really worth mentioning, and this might not track with all of my viewers, but the name Twentynine Palms really stood out to me. We have a lot of these old esoteric sites around the USA being named with numbers and other awkward sort of names that don't really make much sense with what we're seeing in the land. We have towns, for example, like 96, Carolina, which is home to some of the earliest Native American star forts or earth mounds in the shape of a star. And now, looking at 29 Palms, I couldn't help but have this sort of feeling. When you get a feeling in your spine, it kind of runs up your spine, and it's like a tingle when you feel like something's been unlocked, like you've achieved something in the thought that you're having. Well, that's how I felt when I looked into this 29 Palms. You can call it dumb intuition, but palms to me, the word, has always reminded me, even since I was a young child, of the Bible verses of Psalms. And as we look at language and the double meanings that we seem to find throughout history, one thing I'm reminded of is the biblical story of the Tower of Babel, when all of our tongues were convoluted, so to speak. But I digress on that part. What I wanted to look at is 29 palms. 29 palms. To me, the first thing that stood out, or that was screamed at me from these numbers, is Psalms 2:9. And I don't know all of the verses offhand, so I didn't know anything about this verse or what it was, but I knew I had to look it up. And something about Psalms 2:9 really stood out to me. So I'm just going to leave this verse down below and I'll recite it for you. And just think about this verse, Psalms 2:9, in context of 29 Palms and Giant Rock and the military base and ley lines and hidden free energy. Think about all that, and possibly ties to petrified remains or petrified giants or petrified electric energy centers or ancient energy centers, possibly ancient giants. And Psalms 2:9 in the King James Version of the Bible: "Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron. Thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel."